Let's quickly, still using group 1, 2, and 3. Let's still do the who, what, when, where, how, why, and so on. Which group will start? Group 1, 2, and 3. Group 1. Just any of those. You don't need to finish all of them. Just any. So.
Okay, the how. He makes me lie in green pastures. He leads me.
Sorry, how?
That's the how we are trying to answer.
Yes. So that's how for what? How he leads?
Because God is my shepherd.
No, when you say because, the answer is no longer how. So how is the way in which something is done. When you say because, it gives the reason why. So how?
Right, so in verse 1, we saw that the psalmist says that God is my shepherd. Then now we moved on to the how.
Okay, all right, yeah, okay, thank you, yes. How is he your shepherd? Yes.
Because it makes him lie down in green pastures. He leads him besides the still waters. Number 3, he restores his soul. And also he leads him in path of righteousness. Then
Okay. You want to answer another one?
I wanted to move on to the why.
Okay.
Now
Give us, yeah.
Then the why, we saw that because the rod and the staff of the Lord is his comfort. And then, of course...
That's the why for not fearing.
Yes, why?
I will fear no evil. Why? Because you are with me, and your rod and your staff comfort me. Okay.
And then we moved on to the when.
No, it's okay. Let's allow for another group. So we've gotten at least what was the first one? It's how and why. Okay, we've gotten how and why. Thank you. Group 2, give us any of the others. Microphone.
The last question. So what? First, I shall fear nothing.
So which question are you answering first?
The 7th.
So what?
So what?
Okay.
I shall fear nothing.
I shall fear no evil. Okay, yes, that's a consequence. Good.
Yeah, I shall be.
I shall what?
I shall dwell in the house of the Lord.
Okay.
Goodness and mercy shall follow me.
Okay.
I shall be in want.
I shall be in want.
Yeah. I shall not, sorry. I shall not.
Okay, thank you very much. I shall not be in want.
Yeah.
Okay? Thank you. So what? Yes. Thank you very much. Is it group 3? Give us any answers on the 7 fact-finding questions. The goodness when you are in a group, when now the correct answers are being given, even if you were always wrong, you enjoy the fact that you've got correct answers together. Yes?
We tried to answer who, how, when, and where.
Okay.
So who we pointed out, say the shepherd, the provider. That's how we couched it. Then how is
when you say you couched it, you see, at this point, we don't want any couching.
Okay.
We just want what you are seeing. Just bring it out raw.
Okay. Who? The shepherd.
Okay.
Yes. How? that he's making us lie down in green pastures, quiet waters, and
So how we've heard already.
okay, where,
Yeah.
when, or both,
Okay.
in the valley of the shadow of death, and where you're fearing evil.
Where is what?
When you're fearing evil.
When you're fearing evil. Okay, good. All right, so under the who, you could have put the Lord as well. It's obvious. Enemies are mentioned there as well, and so on. Okay, thank you very much. So we have a general idea on these things. We'll skip context and type of book because we've already talked about that. Let me have group 4, 5, and 6 giving us the structure. Group 4, 5, and 6 giving us the structures.
So we...
That's group what?
Group 4.
Group 4, okay.
So we came up with the structure of the text, Psalm 23. And the first thing we identified was that he acknowledges the Lord as his shepherd, which is
Verse
in verse
1.
1.
Mhm.
And he also points out the roles of the shepherd, which is to lead, to restore, to guide, to comfort, and to anoint. And then the last one was he anticipates spending time with the Lord all the days of his life in verse 6.
Okay. So what you did is the first thing you saw in the structure was that the Lord was a shepherd.
Yes.
So it was just the fact that the Lord is a shepherd. Okay? Then after that you saw what the shepherd does.
Yes.
Okay? Which was from verse 2 down to
From verse 2 to 5.
to verse 5.
Yes.
Okay? And then the last was what?
He anticipates spending time with the Lord all the days of his life. In
Okay,
verse
so
6.
what the result, the fruit of that is verse 6. Okay, we'll discuss in a moment. Yes, is that group what?
Group 5.
Excellent.
Yes, so group 5, we combined verse 1 and 6 together.
Verse 1 and 6.
Yes.
Why?
We understanding. So verse 1 says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall lack nothing," which then speaks to, almost as a summary, speaks to the results of the shepherdhood, which is captured in verse 6.
Okay, so let me repeat. What you're doing now is you're just looking. Okay, you're not beginning to fix anything. So the moment I hear you, on one hand, verse 1, the other one, verse 6, I'm already seeing somebody who's bringing himself in. And at this point, please, it's something, it's a discipline, especially people who've taught or preached before. Because the problem is, you've already learned to move in and start taking out pliers and starting cutting this and cutting that. At this stage, you are simply looking. So I want you to flow. That's what I'll be listening for. I just want to be flowing. So you say, okay, like this group said, verse 1 is this, then verse 2 to verse 5 is this, and then verse 6 is this. So at least, although I didn't fully agree, which we'll come to in a moment, but at least I could sense that they were allowing things to flow, and it was sounding that way.
So I don't even know if what I'm going to say is now flowing or not flowing, but I'll go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. Let's see if the next part might be redeemed. Yeah.
Okay, so verse 2, physical provision and protection by God. 3, spiritual provision and protection by God. Verse 4, protection and reassurance in difficult times, the rod and staff being tools used by God to protect. 5, the protection of God resulting in rejoicing in the presence of crisis/enemies. providing a sense of security, in brackets. 6, the results of the shepherdhood of God.
Okay, so you've let 6 to remain where it is, finally. So why did you want to join into verse 1?
Oh, this is when trying to come up with a theme. Sorry.
Okay, that will now be for group, I think it will be 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So we'll get to that later. Okay, so you've done a good job. And part of what I was saying, a bit of disagreement, was now what you've done. Because you've broken down verse 2 down to verse 5. And you've shown that there are distinct sections of it. And that's what I would have wanted to hear from that block group that was given earlier. Okay, so that's group what? 5. Group 6.
So I'll be talking about what we discussed in group 6.
Yes.
So in our outline,
Yeah.
we divided it starting from verse 1 to 3, which talks about the Lord being the shepherd.
Okay.
And what he does as the shepherd, the things that he does, like leading him and everything.
Yeah.
And then we went to verse 4 to 5. So verse 4 to 5, it talks about the writer being in different situations and how the Lord comes in those situations and how he intervenes. And then we went to verse 6. So verse 6, it talks about how after all this which the Lord has done for him, what he is now and what he will be like in the future. So because it talks about goodness and mercy follow him all the days of his life, and he will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So which is now and also in the future as a result of the shepherd.
Okay, so that last part, could you just simplify it into a little phrase? Because it became like paragraphs now. Just so the first part was what the Lord does as a shepherd. Okay, so it's then the second part was something about what he does in different situations. So what was that last part now?
The last part, okay, so to summarize, it just talks about what will happen now and also in the future, because this is not just talking about the present time, but also in the future as well, that he's going to dwell in the house of the Lord forever, and mercy and goodness will follow him.
So
As a
again,
result of the
again,
shepherd.
you've given me a whole paragraph. Just little phrase. Don't worry, I will do the rest of the mathematics. Just how do you phrase it? So, what the Lord does as a shepherd, what he does in different situations. In the last part?
The result.
The results. Okay, the results. Okay, thank you very much. So that's 3 groups, eh? Okay, let's now listen to group 7, 8, 9, and 10 on just the entire psalm now summarized in one sentence.
So for group 7, to summarize it, I'm sure we'll get fire, but we out key themes that we saw through the passage. So ultimately we came with the sentence, the Lord is the Redeemer and Preserver.
Okay. So the way you do it is this. That structure that you put there is what you now try to reduce to one sentence. That's all. So you don't abandon everything and then just now, okay, one sentence. That same structure is what you now crystallize further into a pregnant sentence. So I want to be able to sense this psalm flowing in that summary. So do you have your group, do you have the structure that you ended up with?
Yes.
Okay.
So Our structure, the first part of it is what he is to me. So I went on to say he's our shepherd, etc. Then the second section was what he does for me. So makes me lie down in green pastures, etc. Then the third part and the last of it was what is the end of all this? And then we went on to say goodness and mercy will follow me.
Okay.
And then, yeah.
So your sentence would be something like, what the Lord does for me, in me, and what its result is. Okay, something like that. I've obviously just been thinking on my feet here quickly. That's the sentence I'm looking for. Okay, so as I come to the other groups, please, if you could think like that. The reason why that's crucial is that when you now come to prepare your lesson, you are not starting from zero. It's going to be easier for you now to be able to use the material that you have worked with. But if you just say, the Lord is my Redeemer, you know, that's not helping you to work backwards. Okay, that's going to be your sermon title or your lesson title, just so that you can sound fanciful. You know, the Lord is my Redeemer, and so forth. But when you're preparing, that's not the time to try and sound very clever. You want to deal with what is in front of you. Okay, so that's a typical example. Group 8. Where is group 8? Now nobody wants to be identified with group 8. Okay, so give me some idea of the structure and then give me that one sentence.
The structure, who God is and what he does, verses 1 to 3, 4 to 5, my confidence in God, the psalmist's confidence in God, and then the psalmist's assurance or security of the confidence in God. Yes.
Okay, so now that sentence.
The sentence. Who God is, what he does, and who God is, what he does, and okay. Who God is, what he does, and I will. The English is not English. Okay, let me just read the raw sentence before we. It says, I know who God is and what he does, and I will fully trust in him and put confidence in him.
Okay, all right. So, so that's good because I can see the flow. The only thing is, again, you've moved a little bit further from simply allowing you to look at the psalmist and what he wrote. Okay, so, but you definitely, your group definitely did the right thing in that I can sense the movement. All right? So what we will do once I hear from the other two is that we will now just look together at this text, now that we've worked through it together, and then I will introduce what we'll do after lunch. Okay, so we'll do that. So let me have the other two. So group 9 now, group 9. You've been given the answer sheet, so surely.
For us, the structure was based on 7 repetitive words, but in summary, the summary word sentence we came up with, the Lord will never leave us, and we shall dwell with him forever. That was the summary word.
Okay, so the Lord will never leave us. I'm not sensing anything between verse 1 and verse 4 that says the Lord will never leave us. What's the second part?
And we shall dwell together forever.
Okay, so there's a possibility of that last part being, especially verse 6. So the middle part seems to be largely missing. What was the first part again?
The Lord will never leave us.
Which seems to be verse 4, somewhere there. Yeah, so I think there was need to just do a little bit more. What's your structure? Yeah, maybe let's begin from there. What's the structure?
So the structure was based on 7 repetitive words.
Which is?
So he appears 4 times. And
No,
this
that's not a structure. That's not a structure. That's still just dealing with words.
Okay, so they're all interlinked, but essentially the structure starts with the Lord, who is a constant presence, which is the he that appears the he and you that appears 4 and 3 times. And then there's me and I that reflects the relationship that we have with the shepherd.
Okay, so again, that's the thing I need to help you, because the moment you start doing that, you've gone into interpretation. You've taken one step further, and inevitably what tends to happen is that you begin to make the passage to say what you are thinking. And at this first stage, you are just wanting to see what the things are that are in it, how they are structured, and how I can summarize them in one sentence. That's all. You just want to see, so that when you say that final sentence, and I'm looking at this and I'm saying, yes, I can see how it is covering everything there, because you've made your way towards that point. Okay, so we will, let's listen to the last one. Let's listen to the last group, group 10.
Okay, so for group 10, our structure was what does God do as a shepherd?
Good.
Then the next one was the effect of God being our shepherd, where we talked about we will not lack anything, we will not fear, and the list goes on. And then the third one is why does God do all these things, which we got from the part where he says for his name's sake. We didn't quite agree on the summary, but I'll try just to put together what we put as a structure.
So what you've just given me is only verse 1 and verse 3. I mean, verse 1 to verse 3.
The first one was, what does God do as a shepherd?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the next one was the effect of God being our shepherd.
Which is?
Which is, we will not lack, from verse 1, we will not fear. Our cup runs over. Okay, and the last part, we will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
So all that is in the effect.
Yes.
And then what is your last one?
The last one was why does God do all these things? And we got it from the verse that says for his name's sake. That's verse 3.
So in your second point, you've literally reached the end. Yes. And then in your last one, you've gone back again to verse 3. Now that's the engineering I'm saying, please try and avoid at this stage. Because all you want is just the flow. That's all. You are not trying to interpret anything. You're not preparing the sermon or lecture or lesson. You're not preparing. Stop yourself from wanting to prepare. You are studying the text. We will soon come to now working on the preparation. But for now, try and avoid mixing things as you are seeing them. Try and avoid that. Just allow, it's the difference between, if I came, what is this made of? Plastic, huh? If I wanted to break this plastic, I'll probably need a knife or an axe or a pliers or something, because I'll just be cutting it wherever I want to cut it, okay, until finally it disintegrates. The preparing an expository lesson, instead what you do is it's like taking a vase made out of pottery. And all you do is you lift it in the air and you let go of it. When it hits the ground, the way it fragments, it's in its own weakest points. You are not forcing anything. It's its own fragmentation. That's what you're trying to do as much as possible with preparing an expository lesson. That way, when people are listening to you, beginning to teach, they will sort of begin to say, okay, I think he's finished now with verse 1 to verse 3, as he's now saying, now the next thing is this. And when you say the next thing is this, they can even see, yes, I think verse 4, that's what it's actually talking about. And then when you say, the next thing is this, they can see that it's now verse 5. They can see. Not when you now say the next thing is this, they discover, then they have to go and start scratching again verse 1, and yeah, I think he's taking us back there. Okay, so that's the idea behind the expository lesson. What you want to do is to say, okay, what was the Holy Spirit saying? How did he say it? That's really all you're doing. What was he saying? How did he say it? And that's what you follow. Okay, so let me try. Lunch is supposed to be, earlier we said 13 hours, but there might be a few more minutes. So I want to use the few more minutes to try and just put this together. Then we will now go into the lesson. So I want you to notice a number of things. I hope you noticed them, but let's quickly look at them. First of all, I want you to notice that verse 1 seems to stand on its own. It's simply the statement of fact that the Lord is my shepherd. In fact, I shall not want is a bit of old English, because it's really saying, I shall not lack anything. That want is really lack. Okay, so between the Lord is my shepherd and I shall not want, there is a meaning, a relationship. And it is basically, the Lord is my shepherd, therefore I will not lack anything. It stands out on its own. It's like the introduction. You can't miss it. And then he begins to talk about what the shepherd does in verse 2. Okay. Now, in verse 2, let me use the word fortunate or unfortunately. In verse 2, he's imagining himself to be an animal, a sheep. So, he makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me to still waters. It's easy. David was a shepherd. So he knew that in the morning when he went and got the sheep out, his mind was in two places. One, where will the sheep go and eat? Two, where are they going to drink water? So if I know of a very good place where there is green pasture and where there is water, I even begin walking in front of them and they follow. However, when he enters verse 3, he changes. I hope you notice that. He changes from the animal to the Christian. He says there, he restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. So basically, he's continuing with the theme, I shall lack nothing. But now from an animal, he goes to the human being. So it's actually a spiritual oversight that I am getting. Okay, so my soul is being restored in terms of salvation and sanctification, and I'm being led in the paths of righteousness. Remember, I talked about the parallel, so it's two things really saying the same thing. And then we are being told that it is because it's for his name's sake. As shepherd, his reputation is at stake, and that's why he's doing this. Okay, so I hope you're noticing that. The main change in verse 4 going downwards is that he goes from the third person to the second. So instead of saying he is doing this, he's now saying you are doing this. So, but it's still clearly shepherding. And the reason why you can't miss it is because he's deliberately saying walking through the valley of the shadow of death. Okay, so the animals have fed, it's getting dark, they are now being taken back to the pen, and they enter a valley, and inevitably a valley at that hour will now be very dark and dangerous. So that's really what that phrase is. Rather than after I die, which is the way we apply it normally, but don't worry about that for now. So the animal is going into the valley, it's dark, this is when the wolves are likely to pounce and so on, and he's saying, back to being an animal, I've got no fear. Why? Because the shepherd is here. So why fear? If a wolf suddenly springs up on me, the shepherd is here. And then he finds his comfort in the rod and the staff, basically because the valley is dark. So if I try to go this way and this way in the wrong direction, I'll just feel something go, bang, and I'll know, oh, so I was going wrong way. I must go to the right way. Or I'll just feel this thing around my neck that will pull me. So I will continue going in the right way because my shepherd is with me. Okay, so you can't miss the fact that up to that point he sort of went from the animal to the child of God and back to the animal. Illustrative still of the Lord is my shepherd, I won't lack anything. He now comes back to the human being, and he says, you prepare, he's still in the second person, you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies, you anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. And that's basically a little different. Oh, let me change. He's come back to a human being. The human being has now arrived in the sheep pen. Now, normally, the eating is done outside the sheep pen. When you arrive inside there, it's just now to rest, relax, closed out, you did all your eating. But because he's gone back now to the human being, you've now arrived home, and you're arriving home for a feast. That's what's happening now. He's prepared for you this wonderful feast, and you are now enjoying it. The enemies cannot participate in that meal, so they are outside, they are looking in. Your shepherd has prepared this wonderful feast for you. He's anointed your head with oil. Your cup of wine is just spilling over, the abundance with which he's given you. So he's obviously speaking in terms of the Lord, who is my shepherd, spoiling me now, which goes one step beyond that of the illustration itself. And as you know, illustrations are never 100% what they're illustrating. So he goes into this meal. And then those who are trying to connect verse 1 to the end, obviously that's what it is when he finally says, surely goodness shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Okay, so all the days of my life out there, he is doing all those things that we've seen, and then finally arrive in this place of the feast, and I will dwell there forever. So you can see the flow, and the difficulty is to now give the structure to it, so that that structure properly represents the way in which he is flowing. Don't concentrate too much on man, animal, man, animal, man, animal when you're doing the structure, because it's what is he illustrating in each of those. That's what matters the most. And then when you bring them together, then you are able to say, okay, how is this working out? So I think if you capture it that way, you are generally on safe ground. Okay? So there is the assertion that he is making, it stands out on its own. And then as you were nicely putting it, what he does for me, but it's literally everything there. So you now need to break down what he does for me. So on one hand, it would be, I would say something along the lines of meeting my daily spiritual needs. Again, don't necessarily feel that's the only way to put it. I'm just trying to break it down. The second, meeting my needs when in danger. So that would be verse 4, more or less, mortal danger. The verse 5 would be something of spoiling me with joy. There's something of that. Abundantly blessing me. There's something of that in verse 5. So that's what he does. So you've got about 3 things. Again, how you break them down is completely up to you. But I'm just giving you a sense of movement. And then finally, verse 6 would be the final fruit of all this. The final fruit of all this. Or something like that. So when you now put them down there, it becomes fairly easy to see as you are talking that yes, 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 yes. And that seems to be the structure. With respect to the summary then, it easily becomes something like who the Lord is, what he does, and the fruit of it, or something to that effect. Okay, so that ends up with that final statement. So while we are now waiting for the food that nourishes our bodies, it has arrived. Could we move to the next screen? Because what I want is from eating Instead of coming to listen to me, because at that point your blood will all be around your stomachs, I want you to just go into groups immediately. Okay, so let's go to the next one. The next one. There's like 5, what do you call them? 5 boxes on the one I want. Yes? Okay. So to me, the structure is the breaking of the sound.
Yes.
Yeah.
Remember there were 3 parts: the breakdown, structure, and what the psalm is all about.
Yeah. So that's the way I wanted you to go, from the structure to what it's all about.
Yes. So we found that the structure helped us to do the breakdown better because it was taking longer than doing the structure. It was shorter in our case.
Okay, does anybody understand the difference? Because me, I'm yes. Yeah. Okay.
So what we did is we didn't start with the words.
Okay.
We started with the structure.
Okay.
And worked our way back.
To the words. Okay, that makes sense now. All right. Yeah, so that you could now better sort of look at those words in view of the structure. Okay. All right. Thank you. Aha, we've arrived. So, I'll move here for this purpose. So, what you want now is to change that sentence that you had arrived at, that first sentence, you want to change it to a sentence that is in lesson form. Okay, so, or if it was a sermon, in sermon form. So that's where there was somebody who gave us, the Lord my Redeemer or something like that. So you want to change it into something that will now be talking to the people you are talking with. All right, but still capturing the essence of that, I'm calling it exegetical sermon. Exegetical sentence. That sentence, we want to change it into what would be a teaching sentence or a sermonic title of sorts. Okay? Or you can call it a working title. Then once you've done that, you go back to that structure that you had come up with for the text, and you turn it now into a sermonic or lesson structure. So you now, the issue is, okay, when you now come to that section, what will you actually say to the people? So you make it a sentence, of course a pithy sentence, but you make it a sentence that will now be what you will say. So it could be something like, what the Lord does for me or for us, what the Lord does in us, could be the next one, what the Lord does, whatever. Okay, so you change it so that that structure is now a structure that you can actually say to people. Okay, now, some people are amazing. I don't know how they do it. They can actually make those sentences to be so beautifully align to each other. You know, they even sound the same. You know, maybe they're all beginning with C's or X's or Y's or Z's. I can't do that myself. Okay? They must have been taught by someone who was taught by the Queen of England or something. Okay, me, I can't do that. But if you can, that's the time to do it here. But remember, you are going back to the breakdown that you came up with in the text. So you're not just starting your own thing afterwards. Try and stop yourself from doing that. Because that's where we lose the ability to prepare expository lessons. When we now start doing our own thing, stick with what you dealt with before lunch. Stick to it. And if one of you in your group after lunch starts doing his own thing, just say, Fiaf Makwi, you know? Because in the morning, we didn't see those things. Okay, so that's what you do. Following the contours of the text, which is what we were doing in the morning, except now the structure is sermonic or following a lesson. So when I come to listen to you in the afternoon, yes, obviously there will be the structure of the Psalm 23, but I really want to hear more words that if I'm in the pew and I'm listening to you, my interest will be kept going. Okay, so that's what that is. Here is where there is a little more work to be done. Okay, and strictly speaking, I think once we do this for today, I don't even want to attempt to go, okay, this one is the exercise. I don't even want to attempt to spend too much time here. Okay, so here, I want you to keep 4 letters in mind, 4. And the words are S-A-V-E. It's very easy. Save. Save. I mean, if you forget save, I'll be wondering. I'll be wondering whether you are saved. Okay. Save. Okay, so the save will come out more in the delivery, but you prepare it in your notes. But it comes out more in the delivery. Okay? So the first, the S is you are stating your point. That's the first thing. Because what you are doing here now, just in case you've got bad eyesight, is you are adding flesh to the structure. Okay? You're adding flesh to the structure. So, the first thing you must do is you must state your point. So you state it. Number 2 is that you anchor it. So that A is an anchor. Okay, so what I mean by the anchor is this. You say something like this. So the next thing we see here is that the Lord gives us assurance in our most difficult times. So I'm now dealing with verse 4. Okay? The Lord gives us his assurance in our most difficult times. That's the statement that I've made. Okay? So I've stated it. I'm now anchoring it. So to anchor it, I'm now saying, let's see this in verse 4. So I'm bringing them to the text. I'm anchoring. Then I read verse 4. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me, they assure me. So I've anchored. The V is the validation. The validation. So here's my point. your listeners are sitting there thinking, so how is the assurance coming out of this? So you now say enough for them to see that, yes, that's what it's saying. Yes. So you validate your claim. Okay? So you made your statement. You pulled your statement from here. You then showed the verses that you are actually considering under that statement. You then validate it by showing. Now, some take a little longer to validate because you start saying, the Hebrew says here, the Greek says. But hopefully you will not be doing that. But you show enough for them to see that this is coming from the text. The E is the explanation. The E is the explanation. So now you are explaining not just the text, because a lot of that was during the validation, but you're explaining the actual lesson that is now there. Okay? So in this particular case, you'll be explaining, for instance, how in actual Christian experience, they are the dangers that are related to walking with the Lord. Okay? And then you explain how the Lord himself, you are now dealing with the Lord rather than just the rod and staff, how the Lord actually brings us back to himself. And therefore we have assurance in the midst of a fallen world that we will actually reach our destination. Okay, so you're explaining that truth. That truth. Okay? Then comes a little word, and a little letter, and it's the letter A. Okay, so I'll just add A. I'll explain why you're adding it in a few minutes. And it's the application. Okay, so you want to apply not just the whole lesson, but you want to apply each point. You want to apply each point. So, the famous phrase is this: save a point. Save a point. All right, so each point will have the S-A-V-E-A. Each point will have the S, which is you are stating the point, you are anchoring it, you are validating it so that people can see that this is what it is about, and then you go into the explanation of it, and then finally you go into the application of it. So each point is applied, and then at the end of the lesson you will want to apply the whole lesson now. Okay, but each point needs to have some application that's relevant only to that section. But what I want you to notice is that this is not independent of what we were doing earlier. So even when you are coming to the validation, it's because you had studied that section. You had studied those words. When you are doing your explanation, it's because you've done your structure, you've gone back to the amount of work that you had done earlier. It's informing this section. So what you are now doing is you are simply reassembling. That's all you are doing. You are reassembling in such a way that it now becomes a lesson that's easy to follow. A lot of the work was done when you were, you were separating all those pieces. That's where a lot of the work was done. this part becomes easier because all you are doing is, if I could use the example, if you follow my hands, where you ended in the morning with the one sentence of the entire text, the entire passage, is where you are beginning this afternoon. You just do like this. Okay, you tie it together. What fed that final sentence was the structure, is what now you are looking at as you are changing, making a structure here that is now more sermonic. Okay? It's now more a lesson. So it's this structure that you are simply now moving here. So if you did a good job here, it's easier because you've just moved it here. You are just now making it into more lesson material. Similarly now, this mess, because it was a mess that you started with, okay, is what is now informing this explanation. So you are now asking yourself, if I left out anything there that's really material so that I'm able to teach it here. So this mess at the bottom, which you began with, remember you were sort of just pulling out common words and who is there and when and what and so on. All those things that you were doing there is now what is feeding the last part. And that way you can be able to say, yes, I have explained the passage, I have explained the lesson in that passage, and all I need to do now is the last part, that ka-e. Okay, you apply. And that's it. Okay, it obviously sounds easier said than done. Okay, but remember we said it's a discipline. It grows with doing it over and over and over and over and over again. Okay, so by now, 37 years later of preaching every week, I look at a passage and all those steps are just beginning to happen automatically as I'm looking at the text, all those things. But it's yes, you can't do the same. This is like a crutch. Okay, when we were learning to cycle in our days, our parents bought us bicycles that at the back they had my extra wheels. I don't know whether you parents these days, your children have that. And so somewhere along the way, those my wheels broke off. And we found, we're not falling. Okay, but initially, without them, it would have been completely impossible. So this method, if you can just discipline yourself to avoid jumping to the end, will really help you with the entire process of arriving at a lesson, and it is expository. It's not been forced in any way. Okay, so can somebody find out if our lunch is ready? 5 more minutes. Okay. So, any questions about that? Because when we come back after lunch, we will go into this. Go to the next slide. Yeah, so we will do the do and review sermon construction of Psalm 23. Okay, so that's what we will do. But any questions? Yes, Prof. Microphone. Yeah, there we are. Yeah, at least we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, so thanks, Pastor. I guess that the point you are raising now is really delivery.
No. Delivery, has now to do with things like eye contact, things like voice projection, and so on.
Okay.
Up to now, you are preparing. But I think I understand what you mean.
Yeah.
You are now preparing what you deliver.
Yeah. So
perfect.
The sermon notes, let's say, for example.
Yeah.
You are packaging the sermon notes.
Yeah.
Now, what I wanted to ask is this on point number 3, where you gave us the word save.
Yes.
I was wondering if you could move those around, like, for example, instead of stating your point immediately, you anchor it. In other words, you start with the verse, the text itself. You read the text, because you said first you state your point clearly, make a statement. But I was just wondering if you can start with the scripture itself. You first anchor it, you read the scripture, you validate it, you explain it, then you now state your point. Can you move these around a little for clarity for the...
Yeah. The way the human mind thinks, is this. If it's fact, the human mind wants to know what that fact is, and then everything follows. If it is fiction, the human mind does not want to know what that fact is until later. So let me give a typical example. What is it that makes you read a certain article in a newspaper other than the other? It's the heading, isn't it? So the moment you see something like 23 people perish in car accident, bang, you now want to start reading all these details. If you see the heading is something like Exodus 33, you move on. You see what I mean? Okay. So that's the point. But fiction is the exact opposite. Okay. In fiction, if someone tells you, okay, so someone is about to enter a room, and the music is going, and someone says, no, don't worry, they won't kill him. He will in fact kill them. You say, hey, wait, shut up. You know, he's spoiling your fun. You don't want to know before. Okay. It's fiction. It's drama. I shouldn't know. Allow me to feel the way you also felt the first time you watched it. Okay. So, in communication, it's very much like that, especially when you're teaching, this thing is fact. Okay, it's actually fact. So, you tell people what it is that God is saying to them. Tell them. Don't start waiting for... So, for instance, you can say, abortion is wrong. Then you say, let's see where we are getting it from. Rather than, first of all, you read all the verses and then you say, so according to that, abortion is wrong. You lost them. You lost them long ago. So that's the major thing. So state it, then anchor it. And when you are stating it, that's when even a mother who is feeding a baby at that point will just want to listen. Despite the fact that the little kid is giving problem, but because you stated it. And it means that's what I want to hear. That's what, and then you open it up. Okay. So just remember that aspect of fact and fiction, and it will help you. Yes.
My only concern, Pastor, is that you may have ended up with the wrong answer. So how do you get the wrong answer? You said we shouldn't go back and state what we stated. Just speak in general. Our answer was right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a valid point.
And then on validation, is there room for cross-referencing? I know you haven't talked about
Oh yeah, sorry, cross-referencing, thank you very much, comes in two ways. One is in the validation itself. Because there are times when a verse is not as clear as another one. So when you explain, a few people are still looking at you like this. And then when you say, okay, let's turn to, then you find, okay. So it has helped. So yes, you can cross-reference because of that. But sometimes you cross-reference at explanation stage because you want to bring out a lot more of the truths that are there. Yeah, so that's one way in which it's called bringing in perspicuity, bringing in clarity or better understanding. Yeah. Coming to your first point, which I really appreciated, the reason why we reported back first and then you can go back is exactly that. So now, if your group realizes that we did chigondo over the bar, okay, so our structure was just haywire. You can, now that you know how to structure, just spend a few minutes on the restructuring now, okay? Because we've already peeped in the answer sheet. So I doubt that any of you will really go very far off course. So just quickly do that. Arrive at your sentence for the entire text. Don't try and make it perfect because this is merely an exercise. And then begin what we have just done here. Begin with the sentence for the sermon, which it's a working sentence, by the way. Later on, you then can modify it into a nice lesson or sermon title. Okay, but for now, when you are working, don't bother too much about trying to do that. And then you can proceed to this section. So I'm glad she mentioned that. Okay, yes? Oh yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, so it is at the point where you've got all that mess in front of you when you were studying the text. So a few things may not be as clear to you. So for instance, yeah, that's a good one. If you noticed, when I was now explaining, taking you through the psalm, a number of you were sort of, the eyes were lightening up. Okay, now that's what a commentary does for you. So you've done your breaking things down, you've attempted something of a structure, you've put something of a sentence. Now you are saying, let me now get back to all that mess. I just want to see what others say. So you get there. So you don't begin with the commentary, because once you begin from there, then you are in somebody else's laps. So you begin with your own work. And that's where things like, for instance, the valley of the shadow of death, that's where they then bring it out for you. So you may have just been thinking it's death, okay? Because that's the way we normally apply it, especially when we are singing, okay? Elon kenda mumfwa ine and so on, but it's not mumfwa. Okay, it's danger. Okay, that's what you're really dealing with. But anyway, so the commentary helps you to bring that out, and then you, and so on and so forth. What other thing can I think about there? Yeah, the house of the Lord, I think, would be straightforward. Oh yes, the rod and the staff. Yeah, a commentary will help you to see the difference, that a rod is basically just a rod, but the staff has a hook that then, the ship can be brought back and so on. So commentaries tend to give you a little bit more information that you didn't know, and also it helps to correct perception. There have been quite a number of times when I have worked the work that we're talking about, and then when I've read a commentary, I've kicked at myself that I was at the mercy of my English version. Somebody is now bringing out something that I obviously wouldn't have easily seen, and so forth. So I've had then to keep it in mind as I'm now moving on to the other side of the actual preparation of the sermon. Yeah. So generally what they say is avoid beginning with a commentary. I think that's the bottom line. The Holy Spirit is in you, and you also have the Word. So begin from there. Pray, do your homework, and then of course you realize that others have gone ahead of you. They've been there for a number of years. Then you just consult them. And you find that, in fact, what has happened to me over the years, when I begin a series in a book of the Bible, I would have like 5 or 6 commentaries. By the time I finish chapter 1, going chapter 2, those 5 commentaries have been reduced to 2. Because the other 4 are always saying what I'm already saying. So it's like, why am I spending time on this? But there will always be an author who, yes, in a sense is seeing what you've seen, but it just seems to have that extra clarity that is helpful. But then they also tend to get you over those question marks that you end up having. Yeah. So thank you very much for that. So if you can get commentaries, please do. If you're working through a book and you can't buy one, borrow one, and just take it back after you finish your lessons. Yes? Which one?
Explaining the lessons.
Oh.
And the application. Those 2 items.
Yeah.
Very close, almost the cousins or something.
Yeah, application is meant to be, what should I do in the light of what I have learned? So that's application. So you always think, okay, so in the light of what I have just explained, what should these people proceed to go and do? And then instead of you leaving it to them, urge them to do it. That's the application. So I'm trying to think of an example of a sermon I preached recently. I preached from Galatians chapter 1 to SU students on Wednesday. So that was my last sermon. And it was on the uniqueness of the gospel. It was from, I think, verse 10 to verse 24. So the first part had to do with where Paul says that I want you to know that this gospel that I've preached was given as a revelation. And then he explains how he was brought up in the scriptures, Old Testament scriptures, and so forth. And then the Lord saved him. And then I made the point that it wasn't that he threw away what he had learned, because that entire Old Testament is actually what the gospel rests on. But the Lord gave him another perspective, a Christ-centered perspective, a gospel-centered perspective. So all those animal sacrifices are now Christ crucified and so on. So in my application of that point alone, I mentioned the fact that today we don't just have the Old Testament, we've got even the New Testament. So the old is explained in the new is hidden in the old. And then I said, we must therefore treasure this Bible, because this is God's revelation of his way of salvation. So treasure your Bible. Do you have a Bible? Treasure it. I said, read it, study it, meditate on it, memorize it, and so on. So that's not explanation. That's application. Okay? And then the second point was when he revealed Christ in me. And it's now at the point of his salvation, he's talking about how this was now something that was birthed in him. So when I opened that up, well, of course I explained now all that, but my application was the fact that that's the way we become Christians. It is when this truth, our eyes are opened spiritually to it, so that we now even embrace Jesus as Savior. And my application was to the students, has that happened to you? Have you embraced Jesus as Savior? And so forth. Okay? If not, forget your baptism, forget your church membership, forget all these other things. Come to Christ and embrace him as Savior. So that's what we mean by application. After having explained, you now make sure that each point is up. Don't leave it to the last. Apply each point. Thank you very much.